I've always loved the story. Being Scottish, it's always gained my interest. As far back as I can remember, even in primary school, we touched upon Macbeth, and I did it for my O-levels and my hires in school. And ever since then, I've always had a fascination with the play. The King's two sons are Malcolm and Donald Bain, and my name is Malcolm Joseph Bain. So I thought it was fate that the career should actually take part in it one day. I never thought of actually being in Macbeth or doing the play, because I was never involved in amateur dramatics or dramatics of any sort until I can actually come down in the late 80s. And when I joined a theatre company down in Hailing Island, I then thought, I wonder if I could ever do Macbeth at some time. So it's been in the back of my mind for, 15, 16 years, that this is something I wanted to do. And it was always a vision of how I thought it should be done. And to realise that I came to the decision that to put the play on the way I wanted it to be put on, in the period and the setting, I'd have to direct it myself so I could cast myself and make sure I got the part, and then take it from there. It's little did I know just how much was going to be involved in trying to direct it, as well as actually be in the show. And I think I probably bit off a little bit more than I could chew, to be quite honest. That would be about 5 years ago, I think. It had an all-female cast, apart from the witches, who were played by men, and the porter, who was played by a man. It was an interesting production. Every director puts their own spin on the plays they do, and it was a thoroughly enjoyable play. But to me, a play like Macbeth with an all-female cast didn't quite work for me. I'm a bit of a purist at times when it comes to it. I've watched dozens of various versions of Macbeth, some excellent, some not so excellent. The last TFT one, in terms of production, in terms of acting, was superb. But changing the gender just wasn't my sort of cup of tea. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to wait for a few years before we bring it back round again. And here we are, traditional cast. So if anybody saw the last one and see this one, they can make their mind up as to what the differences are and what they like about that one, what they like about this one. Yes, I do agree. Macbeth, I think, has held its own because it relates throughout the centuries of the pitfalls of seeking power and then trying to hang on to it. It is a key theme in the play, and ultimately led to the destruction of the Macbeths. I was trying to focus on the relationship between the Macbeths, and how there was sort of Lady Macbeth who sort of pushed her husband into it. She was the driving ambition at the start of the play, and he was swithering a couple of times. She forced him into it, but once Duncan was killed, then Macbeth's sort of paranoia took over, and the situation sort of switched. Him being a warrior meant he could just sort of power through and continue in it, and Lady Macbeth became a little bit more distant. She just wanted to be the king and the queen, but Macbeth wanted to eliminate anything he saw as a threat, which would be Banquo, because the witches had really sort of stitched him up from the beginning of the play, and he was determined to eliminate all threats, which ultimately just led to everybody just turning against him. And Lady Macbeth, we assume, committed suicide. And at that point, Macbeth realises everything he wanted has been lost, and it's just go down fighting. It's challenging, to say the least. For example, today we're now in the bar at Margaret's. We should have been at the barn to show off the wonderful barn. Unfortunately, there's no power there. And the reason there's no power is that a squirrel decided to commit suicide in the power lines. So taking everything out and we're now trying to fix it. It's going to be interesting because we have our final dress rehearsal tonight. At least we should have our final dress rehearsal if we can get the power back on. If not, we might be doing it outside, just running through the lines. That seems to have summed up this whole of this production. It's a bit like Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. I've never been one to believe in the curse of Macbeth, but about 2 weeks after I held my first audition, the country went into lockdown, so I'm a little bit more sceptical now. And back then I was went on furlough. I thought the play was going to be cancelled. Theatres were closing down. Kevin Fraser has always been there saying, yes, we're going to be back in August. We're going to be back in August. His positivity is unbelievable. So there was a few months where I didn't do anything really, and then I had to really sort of get a kick start. Got together with Kevin and he said, okay, we'll chase up the crew and we'll get this show back on the road. We'll probably be doing it outside in the barn at this particular point in time. It wasn't set in stone, but we started the rehearsal, started filling in the rest of the cast. We had planned on doing it outside, like The Merchant of Venice was done outside. And then it was only the other week we got the news that we could actually do it indoors. Now, if you're doing a play outdoors, it's an entirely different way to approach it from doing it indoors. Everything from the costume, you've got to make sure it's going to be kind of weatherproofed, lighting, sound. So just upping from outdoors, indoors has been a bit of a challenge as well, especially for the technical crew. It means we can now have more lighting in the first half of the play, because lighting is pretty much useless in broad daylight, and it's only after the sort of interval the lights would come into play, but we can do it from the very start now. And the sound and the lighting crew, the props, they've all done an absolutely amazing job in a short period of time. The cast have put up with me chopping and changing everything here, there and everywhere, and I'm really sort of proud of everybody involved in this. I'm really honoured that in fact we can actually perform this in the barn. 2 weeks ago I didn't think I'd be putting it on in the barn. 2 months ago I didn't think I'd be putting it on full stop. The setting is traditional 11th century Scotland with period costumes. Kevin has always been pushing for kilts, which I've declined. I have given the nod to the tartan flavour with sashes, and we have red and blue sashes for the English force and the Scottish force. The last act tends to be people running on and off, so you need to know exactly who's who at any particular time. The actual script itself, I've tried to keep as intact as possible. I love Shakespeare for the actual dialogue, the actual language. It's fantastic, and you don't often get to see a production where virtually nothing has been removed from it, a lot of the time due to time constraints, but this is the shortest of the Shakespeare tragedies. It's about 2,500 lines. Shakespeare runs about 1,000 lines an hour, so about 2.5 hours, so there was virtually no need. I think I've cut about 27 to 30 lines out of the entire play. I haven't changed very much at all. I tried to keep it as true to it as it was written. I did at one point back in the day think of actually changing it to a modern setting as biker gangs and having a bunch of Harleys ride through one end of the barn and out the other, but that went on the back burner and stayed there, so we stuck to the traditional garb. The show opens on Tuesday, the 25th of August. There's performances on the 25th, 26th and 27th. That's the Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday at 7:30 at the Great Barn in Titchfield. There is a matinee on the Sunday the 30th at 2:30 p.m. and then there are performances on the 31st, 32nd, 31st, 1st, 2nd and 3rd, which is the Monday through to Thursday of the Thursday, and it ends on the Thursday 3rd of September. That is the final performance at the Barn. It will be live streamed on the 2nd and the 3rd, the last two dates, the last two performances of the show.